In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Candy Cane Titans of Titanicus, that being Legio Fortidus or Dauntless. This Legio has some really fluffy rules that hold very true to the lore of the Titan Legion, as well as one of the biggest standout list building rules that had a lot of people raising their eyebrows when they first read it. The Legion as a whole pretty much burnt itself out to extinction by the end of the Horus Heresy, with a handful of Titans left to carry on the name, if that. But let's see how this Legion stacks up on the tabletop. The first of two Dauntless Legio traits is called Children of Mars. This one's actually a bit of a double whammy, and good for a few reasons. The first one is, when it comes to your Fortidus Titans, this allows them to ignore any modifiers or negatives to their command checks, as well as ignore anything that would force you to reroll a successful command check. Without the traitor supplement being out right now, this one's a little hard to pin, but I suspect in the future this is really going to matter, and it's just going to help your Titans reliably keep getting their orders off. In terms of gameplay, right now, without that supplement though, this does give you a really nice bonus to any Knight banners you may be running. As long as one of your Knight banners is within line of sight of one of your Titans, which you'd have to be playing on a crazy terrain saturated board for this not to happen, your Knight banners are allowed to reroll any command checks that would force them to become shaken. Anybody who runs Knights knows that they get really ineffective when they're shaken, and this is just going to allow you to keep those Knights reliably doing whatever you want them to do, and orders where applicable. Definitely a handy rule, and might become more handy as supplements come out in the future. Our next Legio trait was truly an elephant in the room when Legio Fortidus first came out. This one's called Lost Sons, and what it does is it allows you to swap a mandatory component of a Maniple for another Titan, as long as that Titan's a scale of 10 or less, so that's everything from a Warlord and smaller. This one actually inspired an FAQ, just to clear up how you can use it, and it's important to note that you can't actually swap a Titan if the Maniple trait specifically identifies a certain Titan class. The go-to example I can think of off the top of my head would be the Venator Light Maniple with the Opportunistic Strike rule. Because that rule specifically states that when a Warhound drops the shields, a Reaver can take a free shot, that means you can't swap, say, a Warlord into that Maniple for a Reaver. So, to make the most out of this Legio trait, you're going to have to look for Maniples that have generic benefits. This could be, off the top of my head, something like a Corsair Maniple, where you can swap one of those Reavers for a Warlord and get more mobility out of your Warlord, which, again, could be of a huge benefit. A lot of people flocked to Legio Fortidus because of this trait, and it is definitely a staple of the Legio for list building. The first stratagem for Dauntless, like Lost Sons, is actually really fluffy and true to the lore of the Legion. This strat is called For the Red Planet, and it'll cost you 2 stratagem points. What it does is it allows you to ignore the effects of any critical damage on one of your Titans for the entire game round. This one's really true to the lore because after the big betrayal or the death of innocence for Legio Dauntless, its princeps became hellbent on revenge and were so focused on dealing damage to the enemy that they were able to push themselves and their Titans through all sorts of crazy damage just to do some harm. If you find yourself in a pinch, like say you've taken some huge damage to your Titan's head, This stratagem will allow you to completely ignore it and get full use out of that activation. Our next Legio stratagem is once again very true to the fluff for Dauntless. It's well known in the lore that all Dauntless wanted to do is deal as much damage to the enemy as possible, no matter the cost. They just wanted to make their death count. This stratagem's called Red Skies, and it's going to cost you 1 stratagem point. How it works is when one of your Titans falls, and you're forced to roll on the catastrophic damage table, if your Titan suffers a meltdown or a magazine detonation, then they're allowed to add 5 to the Titan's scale. What this is effectively going to do is it's going to make your Titan's explosion 5 inches bigger than normal or what you roll. Classic to the fluff, a Dauntless Princep is just going to run in, and if they die, they're going to take out as much as possible with them. Once again, this one's fluffy, and if you are a fan of running the kamikaze suicide titans into your enemy's lines, then this one might be worth looking at for you. The last thing to look at for Dauntless are the personal traits available to your Princeps Senioris, and once again, a lot of these are pretty fluffy, and 1 or 2 of them's a pretty good standout. Our first personal trait is called Broken by Treachery, and what this allows your Princeps to do is once per round when targeting a Titan, the same scale as your Princeps Titan or larger, you're allowed to reroll a hit die. Where this one gets interesting is you have to reroll all the dice. So this isn't going to be of a high benefit to a high shot count weapon, but it will be really handy on things like a quake cannon or a volcano cannon, and maybe something like a turbo laser on a warhound if you're going that way. The important thing is, I think you're going to get the most benefit out of a low shot weapon as opposed to a high shot weapon. If you are really decided on running something like a Gatling blaster, then this still could be a benefit for you because you don't actually have to use the Princeps trait, but it is there if you completely whiff and miss a majority of your shots. It's handy. There might be some better traits out there in the generic pool, maybe something like Swift Killer, but this one's got its place depending on your loadout. Similar to the Legio stratagem for the Red Planet, the Princeps trait Immortal of Mars allows you to kind of mitigate critical damage to your Titan. What this one does is it allows your Princeps Senioris to count critical damage as 1 point lower than where it currently sits on your command terminal. This overall is just going to be really good at keeping your Princeps in the fight and just pushing through damage. And another handy thing, keep in mind, if you're on your first position of critical damage in a location, because of this trait, your Princeps Titan is actually going to be able to activate as if it had no critical damage. This is really going to help you get the most out of your activations and keep that Senioris in the fight. Our last trait is called Soldier of the Crusade. What this one lets you do is gain an extra stratagem point before deployment. So in most confrontation games, you're going to be starting off with 5 stratagem points. This will actually bump you up to 6, which will let you potentially get off 2 3-point stratagems or 3 2-point stratagems. This could give you a lot of tricks, and if your list is dependent on stratagems, this is definitely worth looking at as it'll let you get more mileage out of them. On the downside though, it doesn't stack, which is unfortunate. What I mean by that is if you had 2 Dauntless Maniples, you would think that you could give yourself this trait twice and gain 2 extra stratagem points. Unfortunately, this one's basically rules as written. You'll only get 1 stratagem point, which is a shame it doesn't stack, but that might have been too powerful. When I think of Legio Fortidus, I think of 2 big things, and those are obviously the Legio traits. Both of their stratagems are okay, but it's nothing that really gets me overly excited in terms of rules. The first big one for me, though, is Lost Suns. That ability to swap a component of a maniple is huge, and this rule really works two ways. Obviously, there's the one everybody thinks about, which is moving a light titan to a heavy titan for those increased guns. Definitely powerful. But there's another flip side to this one, and it's something I am planning on exploiting. And that's actually swapping a heavy titan to a light titan. This will let you free up some much needed points, and you can maybe splurge on an extra activation or some upgrades where you might need them. Another thing for this Legio that kind of gets overlooked, or at face value is easy to escape a person looking at them, is the benefit this Legio has with knights. Your knights avoiding shaken results really keeps them versatile and scary on the tabletop. So those are the 2 points I'm planning on using here. Initially, when I was looking at maniples, man, I was really tempted to go with a Corsair maniple and swap a Reaver out for a Warlord, but ultimately I actually decided to go with a Janissary Maniple. Now, the benefit of a Janissary Maniple is it kind of lets you activation jump or double activate things. So when one of your Titans is activated in the movement phase, as long as there is a Knight banner within 6 inches of that Titan, then you actually get to skip your opponent and you would activate your Titan and that Knight banner before your opponent gets to activate. This is going to give you some really nice synergy with your Titans and Knight banners. On top of that, having Knight banners in your list will actually allow you to benefit off of that Legio trait where your Knight banners can't be shaken as long as they're within line of sight. So you're going to have Knight banners that can't be shaken and skip activations. They're always going to be within 6 inches of one of your Titans, so they'll always have line of sight. This is going to combo pretty nice, and I think be very complimentary for Legio Fortidus. The foundation we're working off of is a Janissary Maniple. Leading this Maniple, I'm actually going to use a Warhound for my Princeps Senioris. This Warhound's going to be kitted out with 2 Turbo Laser Destructors, and I'm largely going to bounce between Broken by Treachery and Soldier of the Crusade for my Princeps traits. I did consider the Devoted Servant of the Machine and Favored by Fortune, but I think these 2 Princeps traits work better for the list as a whole. Broken by Treachery is going to let me re-roll the hits for one of those turbo lasers, and if I think I need the extra tricks and stratagems, I'll opt for Soldier of the Crusade, giving me 6 stratagem points instead of the usual confrontation 5. My Senioris is more or less there to get the orders off and throw the pinpoint kill shots. As they're turbo lasers, I can go called shots with them. To round out this Janissary Maniple, though, I'm actually going to take advantage of the Dauntless Lost Suns trait, and we're going to swap the Reaver for another Warhound. All 3 of the Warhounds I'm adding to this list are going to be the tried and true Vulcan Mega Bolter and Plasma Blast Gun. This is just good for almost every situation on the tabletop. It also serves a purpose of keeping things relatively cheap and freeing up some points for what I think will be the list heavy lifter, so to speak. Now, I did a lot of reading, hence the delayed release of this video, on how knights work for Titanicus. And it gets a little conflicting here. So, as far as I know, I need to build a list to a lance, being 3 banners to include specific knight houses. But I'm restricted to only 2 knight banners in support for a Legio list. Correct me if I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, that's awesome, but as far as I can tell, working off of a Janissary Maniple, I can only include 2 Knight support banners. So, as these don't have a house, I'm going to kit these out identical, and they're going to be 2 groups of 6 Questoris Knights fully decked out. That's going to include 2 battle cannons, 4 thermals, the meltas, the missile pods on the thermals, and all with melee weapons. And what we're trying to do here is the Knight banners are going to take advantage of the Children of Mars for Dauntless, meaning it's very unlikely these Knight banners are going to get shaken, so they're going to be reliable throughout whatever mission I'm going for. On top of that, the Janissary Maniple is going to allow these Questoris Knight banners to piggyback off of the Warhound activations and essentially give me double activations regardless of mission info. As per usual in Titanicus, we have a few moving parts to cover. So, in terms of deployment, I'm largely going to deploy this force in 2 subsections. They're going to be 2 squadrons of 2 Warhounds. Each squadron is going to have a group of 6 Questoris Knights around them. Now, these banners are always going to be within 6 inches and typically always within line of sight. What I'm trying to do here is I'm going to take advantage of Children of Mars, making these banners very difficult to become shaken, and the Janissary close support rule, allowing me to piggyback and double activate for each of my activations. These are more or less going to act as 2 independent battle groups within the Maniple as a whole, which, given the mobility of this force, I'm able to cover all of the standard mission sets. I have the speed to full stride and get to the other end of the board. I also have the speed to double back and get back to my side of the board. And the Warhounds and the Questoris Knights are just going to keep piggybacking off of each other and act in synergy. That being said, let's just look at a individual half of this list and see how it kind of acts out on the battlefield. So, to take advantage of the close support rule, as this happens in the movement phase, ideally, once everything's in position, I'll have the Warhounds open up on their given target. Now, because of the close support rule, I am now able to activate the Knight banner within 6 inches. In this case, the Warhounds have done their damage to their target. They've hopefully softened it up in a few spots, and we can now jump to the Knight banner as per the Janissary. The Knight banner typically will be going off of one of 2 orders. In this case, we'll say they had a first fire off of the Warhound's first fire, and they'll unload their shots, called shots, where I can, and just damage the daylights out of whatever the Warhounds opened up. This should typically cripple the opponent, and we can just strategically keep picking off Titan by Titan this way, just off of this alternate activation game. On the flip side, once again, and this is as per the previous example, gonna take some work on the player's part to kind of see the situations as they come and pre-guess depending on the target, but if the range permits, I would once again go first fire on the Warhounds and damage the target, but in this case, once the shields are dropped and the target's softened up, I would then get to activate the Knights in the movement phase off of a charge order, and the Knights would zoom in and take advantage of the fusion guns and melee weapons and once again destroy the target. The whole gimmick of this list is really the piggybacking and activation off of the Warhounds with the Knights. Whatever the Warhounds put their guns on, the Knights are going to skip that activation and come flying in and just mop up. Whether that's first fire or charge orders, the Knights are going to clean it all up, and the Children of Mars trait is going to keep them unshaken and reliable, and the Janissary Maniple is going to allow me to accomplish all of this. So between the two of these, it's basically an open and closed case. That's the gimmick. And when you think about it, in terms of the battle group as a whole, I have 2 independent sections that will be able to switch and react as the mission goes. Now that we know how the list generally performs, we're going to take a look at some hand-picked augmentations just to push things to the next level with some stratagems. The first strat isn't really a high priority, but it could be handy and have its place, and that is Red Skies from the Legio Fortidus page. This will cost you 2 stratagem points, and where I would think of using this is, say a Warhound had its legs critically damaged. This will allow you to ignore that critical damage and potentially accomplish a mission like retrieval or vital cargo if it comes up. Our next kicker is a generic strat out of the Legio supplement, or Loyalist supplement, and this one's called Dawn Attack. It's pretty pricey, coming in at 3 stratagem points. What it allows you to do is limit yours and your opponent's range to d6 plus 1 times 5. I know, the math would just be frustrating to work this one out, but the strat itself comes into play for the first 2 game rounds, and where this is going to be handy is you have, for this list, 2 elements of relatively short range Titans, all being Warhounds and Knights. They're typically going to have a gun range of around 24 inches. This will allow you to move your elements into the midfield for the mid to late game, and just help you weather that storm in the early game turns. Our last kicker, and I would call this one an auto take, is Martian Servitor Clades out of the Loyalist supplement. I believe it's available to everybody. It might just be Loyalist. But what this does is it allows you to add 2 Servitor Clades to your damage control phase for each Titan. It's a little steep though at 3 stratagem points, but I think this one's going to have a huge impact on your gameplay. In addition, if you happen to be fighting Legio Mortis or Tempestus, you're actually going to get to add +1 to your die rolls, making that repair phase even more effective. With this list, you're using solely Warhounds, and they have a really weak repair potential. Like, it's hard to repair the Hounds once they get beat up. And what this will let you do to get around that is just boost your repair rolls across the whole Maniple. I would save this for a critical turn when your whole Janissary Maniple is about to break and just Titans are looking like they're about to explode. Let's take a step back. If you're feeling very outgunned and stretched a little thin, especially when you look at what Maniple or loadout your opponent has brought, this list does have some inbuilt durability, and you can always take that Princeps trait, Soldier of the Crusade. This will give you 1 extra stratagem point, and in a typical confrontation game, that'll give you 6 stratagem points to work with. This would allow you to use both Martian Servitor Clades and Dawn Attack for a pretty good combo, and just some added durability to those Warhounds, giving you position and that great repair rolls. That was the Legion and the list. Let me know what you think and which direction you would have gone in, especially if you are a Fortidus player yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.